Okay, so we're going to be recording, and
Okay.
here we are. I say welcome to our Ladies Who Lunch. We have a very special guest today. We've had a few little kind of glitchy things that have happened from a technology standpoint, but guess what? We have our guest on here, so I thank you for your patience. Uh, Let me formally welcome Nina Williams-Mbengue. Welcome, welcome. And
Thank you.
Bill was showing a little bit of my tablescape that I did, obviously for Independence Day. My mother's birthday, she turned 98, was July 3rd, and for you. And so I'll just read a little bit of your intro. But Nina is the daughter of Edna Lewis's younger sister, Naomi. At the age of 12, she lived with her mother and Miss Lewis in New York City and typed up the manuscript for A Taste of Country Cooking, Miss Lewis's seminal cookbook based on her childhood. And I've heard many of the very important people in the culinary world talk about that this is the most important American cookbook. And so the Americana theme is sort of throughout and with what I'm wearing and so on. So thank you, thank you, thank you for coming. Thank you for your patience with our technology here. So cheers.
Cheers.
Are you having your tea?
Yes. My daughter made this cup for Mother's Day. One of my
Excellent.
daughters.
Oh, beautiful. So here's the cookbook that I have and I refer to often, which is wonderful. And I've had it autographed by you and Judith Jones. So I'll tell everybody, when I first met Nina, it was in New York City, and it was at a panel discussion at the New School, right around the corner from me, as well as the James Beard House right around the corner. And I was just so fascinated with the whole subject matter and the fact that it was a discovery for me about your aunt. And Judith Jones was there. So for people in the culinary publishing world, Judith is a real icon. And she also discovered Julia Child. You know, a lot of people know her from there. But I sat like 2 seats away from you, and I was saying when we were doing sort of our tech, I have these great pictures of you, and you're very easy to talk to, and I'm very, very honored that you could be with us today. You're very inspiring. So we're going to cover, you know, a couple of things about how you were such an integral part of producing this great American cookbook, and your family and how you balance that, you know, and so on. So first, maybe you can tell us a little bit about where your family came from and maybe how that infused the recipes. You know, are these family recipes or were they cultural recipes? Are they Southern? Are they African? So tell us a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Great, great, great. I'm so thrilled to be here as well. And I'm just honored to be able to talk about Aunt Edna and all the people of Freetown that she was so inspired by. The recipes in the book, they're family recipes, but they're also community recipes.
Mm.
I remember when I was 12 and we were living in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, and Aunt Edna was writing the manuscript, and I typed it up because her handwriting was like chicken scratch, and Judith Jones couldn't have read it. I remember that she would frequently call her sister Jenny, who was on her farm in Virginia, and her brother Lou, and go over the recipes and go over the memories of life in Freetown to make sure that she got it right. So they were family recipes that her mother had cooked, Grandma Z, her sister Jenny still cooked. At that time, her sister Ruth, who just passed on June 25th, who was 99 years old, was still cooking, and our other relatives still cook. So their family recipes, their community recipes, Aunt Edna's memories from the Taste of Country Cooking are from listening to her grandmother and grandfather, who had been born into slavery, but lived into their 90s. And after slavery, they formed this community called Freetown. And Aunt Edna, my mother was too young, and Aunt Ruth, the one who just passed, was too young, but her other brothers and sisters were born and grew up in Freetown. And these are her memories directly from there. Aunt Edna always spoke about the various roots of the cooking, which were African, Native American, and European.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to, combine the food. They were cooking for the people that they worked for, the people that owned them, on the plantation, but they were also cooking for their families. And after slavery was over, they were cooking for their families and communities. They one of the things that so impressed me was when they formed Freetown, they planted orchards,
Hmm.
all kinds of fruit orchards, which would take a long time to produce fruit, but they had a dream that they would survive, and continue to exist despite what they've been through.
Yeah,
Yeah, so they're definitely both.
growing food is a very powerful act, that you have
Mhm,
control over
mhm,
your foodways. I love what James Beard wrote. It's on the back of the book, The Taste of Country Cooking. And further down, he said it's a delicately drawn picture of an interesting period when American cooking was a series of family events, and I found
mhm,
such honest satisfaction in the simple delights of Mrs. Lewis's descriptions and recipes. So these
mhm,
family events, community events that you're talking
mhm,
about, so she
mhm,
must have, inculcated and,
mhm,
and wrote them up. And her peers were Julia Child and James
mhm.
Beard and all these icons. It's interesting that it's at that point, but I think your aunt Edna was far ahead, even those, because they were, Julia was more bringing the French cooking here and so on. But the
Mhm,
farm to table and the food
mhm,
waste and the real Americana. I mean, I've written, so many of my books about these great chefs and the food markets and so on. It was all based on around, the French culinary discipline,
mhm.
Escoffier and all of that. But these chefs here in America are saying, but we have our own stuff, or,
Yes.
chefs around the world. So, but I think your aunt was really the one that really helped, impart that original farm to table. Um, Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the typical day of your typing. Were you a good typist? Did she look over your shoulder? Was she typing? I mean, typing is not easy.
Oh boy, I was 12 when I started. I had a new typewriter, and all these young
Oh,
people won't even know what a typewriter is. And it was
yeah,
not an electric typewriter. I took a typing class in seventh grade, so I was hot stuff.
oh,
And
yeah.
Edna had these long yellow legal pads that she would write the recipes out on, and she
Oh,
said, "Nina, you're going to have to type this up for me." And we were home together, and I typed it, and I would try and correct some of the let's say Aunt Edna, what did I say? She didn't like periods and commas. She would
oh,
literally have a sentence that would be from the top of that legal pad down to the bottom. And
that's
I think,
cute.
Aunt Edna, you can't, we got to cut this off. You can't. But
That's
a
cute.
lot of it was those long lists that we see in the cookbook of the different foods or the vegetables or the baby chickens and the baby this and the baby that. But
Was
so
it
she
all,
did.
was it all smudged up? Did she use them from her cooking times?
No, she was writing with pen and ink right there.
But I was saying
At
a
that
a
point,
lot of cookbooks, they have like smudge
yeah,
marks or from cooking or
right,
boiling, gravy
right,
stains or
right.
something.
When sometimes a little bit, but mostly she had tested that we'd written them out. It was a lot of back and forth. She was testing them in our little kitchen in the Bronx, in our little railroad apartment. She was calling her sisters and brothers, going over it. Jenny, I did this and I did that. It didn't taste quite right, and they were
Mm,
doing it. And then she was often the recipes were retyped after I initially typed them and sent them to Judith Jones, who might have some questions, and send it back.
I see. How
And
often
then they
were
were
you
ultimately
sending them in?
tested.
How often were
Say
you
that again.
how often were you sending in the pages? Was it like every day you had two or three or
I Yeah, I think it was probably every week,
every?
because of course at that time she had to go to take them to Judith Jones. We
Oh,
didn't have the internet or anything like
oh,
that, so we were typing them up. Any copies we'd have to use the was it carbon copy paper that you put in between the pages to make another copy.
yeah,
But
that
I
was
do
bad.
remember they would come back from Judith maybe with more questions, more clarification, and she would work on that and then pass that to me, and I would work on that, give that back to Aunt Edna, and then she would go back to Judith. So I think probably a week or every 2
Yeah,
weeks. I can't remember back to that detail,
yeah,
but it was
it's really
back.
fascinating to me how Judith was able to embrace this cooking that she really didn't really know that much about, as far as I understand. and yet give such direction, on the manuscript itself. How long did it take you to type the whole thing?
Oh my God. If I started when I was 12, the book I believe was published in 1976. I think
Yeah.
that's right.
Yes.
So it took about 3, 4 years, I believe. And
Wow.
that would include testing. That would include the formal kitchen testing
Yeah.
at Knopf, which I don't remember that much about. I certainly remember us testing it because I got to eat it.
Oh,
And
that's
that was
fun.
wonderful.
Do you have, from your family and from on end, do you have a favorite couple of recipes or things that you
Ooh,
still make, or
yeah.
maybe you've changed them, maybe you've improved on?
Well, my favorite, oh my God, apple brown Betty, which was a dessert that I loved.
I-
Yeast, there were so many of my favorites. Apple brown Betty, the fried chicken. So my family did not deep fry the chicken. The chicken was pan fried
Oh,
in butter, fresh homemade butter, and the pig hog fat. And I don't use that when if I fry chicken for my husband. Um, all the greens, all the vegetables. Oh my God, all the tomato dishes. Some of the stuff was so simple. Sliced tomatoes that would have been fresh out of the garden with a little bit of salt, a little bit of sugar, and some black pepper. That was just divine, and a little bit of vinegar. Those would be among my favorite recipes. Blackberry cobbler, peach cobbler,
mm.
coconut
You're,
layer cake,
oh,
because she made those for my birthday when I was real little.
oh,
And
nice.
she'd use a fresh coconut, nothing was packaged or
No.
pre-made. And
Where did
she'd
she
make that.
source all the ingredients from? Were there community gardens or African American, shops or bodegas? Because it's the ingredients that.
Right, right. Yes, I remember it was the green markets, which were, I think, relatively new then, because this would have been in the 70s.
Yeah.
Places like maybe Dean and DeLuca,
Oh, wow.
different
Yeah.
places in New York City. And there were, yeah, there some of the books, I think in Pursuit of Flavor, which was the book after The Taste of Country Cooking, she talks a bit more about where she sourced
From.
the different products, because some of the products she made her own baking soda, for example.
Oh my gosh, that really is
Yeah,
going
yeah.
right into detail. I've heard you talk about, how much she loved Africa and the heritage and the cultural heritage and turning people onto root. I'm going to put a pin in that for a minute to come back to your foundation in a second. But did it influence you? I mean, even in your choice of husband, you told me your husband in Africa. So, like, did that influence you? And also, as part of that, with the heritage part with your aunt, is it some way, I mean, of course you adore your aunt and so on, but is it like you're fulfilling a responsibility? Is it at times a burden because you are almost the bearer of this,
Mm.
the Edna Lewis Cultural Foundation? So is there that balance that you have?
Yeah, I definitely was heavily influenced by her love of Africa and all things African. While this was going on, she worked as a teaching assistant at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City in their African Hall.
Oh, wow.
So that she was employed there, not as a volunteer, but as a teaching assistant.
Mhm.
And she went through a rigorous training program with all kinds of books about African history that she passed on to me. And I read them. And of course, she was my aunt. My mom was working 3 jobs, and Aunt Edna was working 1 or 2. And so I spent a lot of time with her. And my mom ended up putting me in a private school in Manhattan, Calhoun. So after class, I would walk over to the museum and ride home with Aunt Edna on the subway up to the Bronx, because you didn't want to ride the subway by yourself.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time with her, and she was the first woman that calling herself African American
Oh,
and
wow.
explaining to me what African meant and why that was important to her. While she was at the Museum of Natural History, she met lots of young African students that were in the United States by themselves studying, and they befriended her and
Oh,
sort of adopted her as their mom. She was a wonderful person. She was very soft spoken, real quiet, very positive, and she was so passionate about Africa. She would ask them questions and became friends with them. And they started giving her gifts of these beautiful clothing and beautiful fabric that they made themselves, and that's where she began wearing
Right.
African clothes. She adopted a young man, an adult son from Eritrea, who I'm close with now, and
Wonderful.
we do a lot of things, representing her and the foundation together. As a matter of fact, after working Paulus. So we still have that connection. They built a home together actually in Freetown,
Really?
many years ago when he was first married and had a son there. Oh yeah,
Did she
and
legally adopt him, or was it like she just took him?
legally adopted him. No,
What?
yeah, that's her legal son. Yes, yes, yes.
I mean, she's so
So yes,
regal looking. I mean, she could, and
yes,
you are too.
yes.
Could look like a,
Not as much
athlete.
as her. She was tall and
Yeah,
slender.
yeah. She had
And
that.
really, she had that hair, that long hair pulled back in a bun, and she was just really elegant, and she didn't really know it, or she didn't, she wasn't. It wasn't feigned. It wasn't
Mm,
put on. It was just her character, and then being really kind of shy and
uh-huh.
sweet. I think people were, but very passionate about cooking and food and the African and African American experience with food and foodways. That I think she was just very engaging.
And how, I mean, this is like she was so far ahead of her time when you think about it, and yet
Mhm,
you can't discount, I mean, all artists, and I think she was a culinary
mhm,
artist, we do it for the passion, not, you don't really make any money from it, so to
mhm.
speak, even though you would want to, but your mother, you said, worked 3 jobs, and it sounds like she
Mhm.
worked many jobs in order to, be able to get to do this. Um, and so they still had this presence, they were
Yeah,
so
it's
proud.
true.
Yeah, and I
They
think
all did.
that inspiring to me and to many others, obviously, but is that what helps drive you and your family, for this legacy and the foundation?
Yes, definitely. Part of it is that Aunt Edna wrote the book, or it was published when she was 60. She'd
Wow.
had a complete life, of course, before that. She did the another cookbook, the Edna Lewis cookbook, which was the first one. And I tell my friends, I said, we've got so much ahead of us that we have, don't think that we're too old, or no matter what, the media says or showcases. No. If there's something you love and you're passionate about and something that you want to pass on to people, if you have a message for people, you go ahead and you do that because you can.
Yes.
And women do that. And I've been so admiring of her at the level that she worked. I remember being at Gage and Tollner in Brooklyn. She was the executive chef there in the 80s, and she was in her 80s, and she would start out 7 or 8 in the morning, going till 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and she was running rings around the younger chefs around her.
Oh,
Yes.
go
She
girl.
was really incredible. And all of the siblings were like that. My mom worked until she was 70. When did we get her out here? 75. We had to drag her out of work. She was working in retailing. My mom was an artist too when she was
Mm,
younger. The sister who just passed away, she worked, she retired, but then when she moved to Virginia, she farmed. She was farming on her own, raising chickens and guinea fowl and turkeys from the egg to slaughter until a few years ago,
thanks.
and farming. The uncles, Uncle George, Uncle Lou, Aunt Jan, they were all very active. They all loved the outdoors, gardening, farming. My mom always lived in New York, so she didn't really garden or farm, but they worked and loved working. And that has always been inspiring to me, that they could work and help people.
Yes.
And they always talked about the old folks. And now I
Yeah.
feel like I'm the old folks now. But these are the people in Freetown that had so inspired them.
See, so it's
And I
like
often,
the elders is that they have so,
yes, yes,
respect for,
yes.
and I think, you're so right to, when did you start the Edna Lewis Foundation? Was that you, and
Yeah,
your,
sure. I know. I did not start that. Chef Joe Randall started the Edna Lewis Foundation, and that I'm gonna, I'd have to look up the exact year,
Mhm.
but that was the beginning. He started that in
Okay.
Atlanta, or out of Savannah, Georgia,
Okay.
the Edna Lewis Foundation, and it was to highlight her work and showcase up and coming chefs, African American chefs, and people in the
I see.
food field. And it's been ongoing since then. But Chef Randall did begin the Edna Lewis Foundation.
So you're a board member of it, and I know
Yes.
we were talking before is that it's coming up that you have some scholarship opportunities.
Yes,
Maybe it's
yes,
an opportunity to share with the viewers,
yes,
how they could
yes.
enter, or what those scholarships are about, and how they can, if other people or corporations want to be a sponsor or contribute monies, that's always
That
good
would be
too.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. We're trying to continue to build it up. So the 2023 Edna Lewis Scholarship Program has begun. July 31st is the deadline.
Okay.
And we are in the midst of rolling out a media campaign to try and get applications. We are giving out 3 scholarships in the amount of $5,000 each, and they're
Wow.
in the areas of culinary arts, agriculture and farming, and storytelling. And if you go to the Edna Lewis Foundation.org,
Okay.
this is a website online. They're also on Facebook, but you'll get all the information about the scholarship. The application is there as well, and the details and the questions. And we asked them to write an essay about what they know about Edna Lewis and how she may be influencing what they want to do as far as cooking or farming or storytelling.
Hmm.
Um, and then let us know what they would do with the money. And we, work with the folks. We go through the applications, and we form subcommittees on the board to look at each of the different areas, and then we determine who will win the scholarship. And then the scholars not only get that $5,000, but they get to work with a mentor
Oh,
for the
nice.
next year, and that's the mentor of their choice. And we have a nice network of people
How
in the culinary industry that can assist them.
how many years have you been doing this scholarship? Sorry about the ringing here.
Oh, sure. No, we've been doing it started when the foundation opened with Chef Randall. So
So
the current iteration where Mashama Bailey is the chair of the scholarship has been about 5 years now.
maybe I'm
And
going
if
to.
you go onto the website, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say maybe do a follow-up story when I write about you from my Garden Glamour blog, but
Oh,
on some of the past recipients and how they've
yes,
gone on to,
that,
success.
sure, that would be great.
Yeah, because you're really supporting them and helping them, and
Mhm.
everyone needs that when they're really.
Yes,
I mean, is it
yes.
just young people, or any age can enter?
Any age can enter. I think we asked that they be over 21,
Okay.
but any age can enter.
And I love also that you love gardening so much. You were telling me the other day about your uncles and being involved in botanic gardens, and on
Oh, yes.
Edna with the growing. I mean, I'm a garden designer also, besides a
Yeah.
writer and author, so it's dear to my heart. But again, I think I mean, the beauty of a garden is one thing, but also to grow your own food is very exciting. But do you think that's just like part of your DNA now?
I think so. I think we were all influenced by Freetown. I know they were. Her older brother, George Lewis, went to war, was in World War II. He was a medic. He was actually at the invasion on the beach in Normandy,
Wow.
and he used his the GI money to
Mhm.
go to get a degree in botany at Hampton Institute. And then he went on and got a master's in entomology. And he ended up going to Pasadena, California, and he retired as the superintendent of Descanso Gardens. And he was there for a number of decades and was involved in the formation of that garden to what you see today. It's a beautiful, beautiful public garden. And he did that in would have been the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Oh,
And he
wow.
retired in the 80s as an African American man doing something like that. That was incredibly inspiring. And
That
they all, and Ruth gardened, Jen gardened, and I always wanted to garden. My mom sent me to her sister Jenny's farm every summer until I was about 13 or 14. So when I retired in 2020, and I became a master gardener because I want to do
Oh,
that. Because I've been gardening, but I've been working full time, having kids, traveling.
so
Sometimes,
you're a lot like your mother and your aunt, like
yeah,
juggling
yeah,
3 or 4 things. So how
it's
did
a good point.
how did you juggle a paying job? You said at the foundation, no one takes a salary, so you're doing that for love and the burden of great responsibility, your own garden, and your children. So how did you manage to do all of that?
I don't know. Let's say I had a lot to learn when I became a master gardener. I had a list about 20 things that I was doing wrong. So I couldn't pay as much attention as I do now to
Right.
the gardening. So it's much better. My vegetables are much better. I do xeriscape in my garden, front
Oh,
yard,
very good.
backyard. It's much better.
Very good.
But I just enjoy it. It reminds me of them and being around all of them. I
I
find
always
the one.
I always say that gardening is a very humbling experience,
Yes. Oh, yes.
for your home
Yes.
gardening. For my garden clients, I mean, I have to, be top of the game and really design
Well,
things that are
right.
sustainable, that they
Hmm.
can, sort of take care of on their own. So it's not like
Hmm.
you're doing something wrong. It's just you learn best
Hmm.
practices, as you
Yes.
go along.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
It's very
so
therapeutic also, I find, with the stress of traveling and the work that I was doing, to be able to come to the garden. I just found that very,
is
very relaxing.
I was giving a little garden tour around our own home here. A dear friend came to visit who actually lives down in Virginia now, so she was
Oh,
missing it here. Yeah, so I took her, around. She said, there's something so soothing, just being out in the garden. I said, yes, just even looking
yes.
at a garden or
Yes.
looking at pictures of a garden is, you know, it reduces your stress level.
Yes, yes.
You know,
Definitely for me.
but
Yes.
but a couple things going back. So I wanted to ask how you balanced your life, honoring Aunt Edna and your family
Mhm.
and the
Mhm.
foundation and your
Mhm.
work with children and your gardening. Did you just keep pushing it, or did you find some maybe family secrets that you could balance those things, or is it just your strong will?
I, it's a great question. I think I just kept pushing it. For one thing, the gardening was relaxing. So that helped sort of offset. I work for the National Conference of State Legislatures, which is a nonprofit organization that all legislators and legislative staff in all 50 states and territories are members of. And we serve them with research, publications, training, education. And my area was in child welfare, adoption and foster care and kinship care and child maltreatment. So it was really just, wonderful to be able to work with legislators and see what was going on in their states, what problems they were facing with children, and learning from the people that worked, in the field, or the young people that were in the foster care system, what they were going through and how policies could help them. So sort of offsetting that, coming home and just being able to just go in
Yeah,
my backyard
yeah,
and, trim flowers, try something new, was just very relaxing. So I think one thing drove the other.
good.
And
That's do
I
your
just felt
children
it.
do your children cook or cook and garden? Sorry.
No, no, they don't. They cooked when they were smaller and they were here. We would have, they had a restaurant. I think it was called Sweet and Sassy, a restaurant they made
Oh,
up. They'd
very
make
cute.
up menus. They'd come up and they would actually cook and cut up things for my husband and I. This is when they were much younger. And they didn't do that so much when they were teens. And now, as young adults, they go with me to these different functions related to Aunt Edna, which is great because I would love to pass this interest onto them. So they're
Yeah.
really interested and intrigued. And they were real tiny, but they met Aunt Edna
Oh, nice.
before she passed. And I was just looking at a photograph of them visiting her in Atlanta. This was the last year after my mom died, and they were playing patty cake. They'd made
Oh,
the little clay cakes, and they were pretending to cook for Aunt Edna,
oh,
and she was just laughing. She didn't, really, understand or recognize them too much, but they
she
had a
must have
great
loved
time.
that.
She
Yeah.
really loved it. Yeah. And I
You
just
know,
always remember
a,
that.
a lot of people, I mean, your family's so lucky to have had that, physical connection, but your aunt is so beloved and so well known. A lot of people may remember she had a stamp in
Yes, that's
2014.
right.
So that
Yes.
was beautiful. Some people didn't, so that's great. And then a fun fact that I learned was that she was also a answer on Jeopardy.
Yes. Yes. We were thrilled. That's when we said, wait a minute, there's something going on here with Aunt Edna's a revival of her memory. it's been amazing to see young people's response, these young people that are cooking and getting degrees in food history. It's just really amazing. She was on Top Chef. She was not on Top Chef. What am I saying? But she was the cooking challenge on a Top Chef a couple
Oh,
of years ago episode. Yes. And
interesting.
that was really great. She received an honorary PhD from Johnson and Wales University
Oh, I've
back
been
in the
there. That was
80s.
great. That's a
Oh, wow.
cool. Yeah. Wow.
Okay.
That's
And
impressive.
she's won numerous awards. So we're really proud. We're really, really proud about that.
Why do you think
And,
it's so enduring? It's like, uh, great artists, sometimes their
mhm,
fine art becomes more
mhm,
revered and,
mhm,
more costly to purchase and so on after they die. But,
mhm.
chefs is very unusual. I mean, James Beard, Julia Child,
Right,
Judith Jones.
right,
But why do you
right.
think your aunt is getting so much of a cultural icon at this point?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to me. I think that she influenced a lot of these chefs, and people are still reading the book. Alice Waters, who was considered the sort of, not the mother, but who really brought the farm to table movement.
Mhm, mhm,
In some of the forwards she wrote in Anna's book, she talked about knowing that she wanted to do organic gardening, organic food, but not really knowing where to go with this. And when she read The Taste of Country Cooking, she realized this is what she wanted to do. She wanted to talk about good, fresh food, locally grown. And
mhm.
I think that movement blew up, and now people are realizing the influence that Aunt Edna had on this.
Bill
I
Cons-
think the writing in the book is incredible, and I think people don't expect that. It's very beautifully written, very
Mhm.
simply written, and very visual.
Yeah.
And I think that continues to just really touch people. And I think people can relate from all walks of life, from all races. People who grew up in the South recognize the food, they
Mm,
cook it according to her recipe, and they say, that's it. That's what I remember. That's what my mom made. That's what my grandma made.
mm,
So
mm.
I think that. And then she had no airs or anything like that. She was just a very sweet, really wonderful person, and very serious about this food. And I think that's still engaging people.
And what I read too is that so many of her peers or the culinary professionals in New York were like, today you'd say like groupies or influencers for her because they admired her and respected her so much. So
Yes,
she did her thing, and yet, maybe the, population at large might not have heard of her, but they adored her.
yes, yes, yes.
So
It's
I think we
amazing.
should agree that you need to write, a book about her and your family going
I would
forward.
love to.
All
I
right.
would love to write, or someone write a book about Freetown,
All
or the
right.
Freetowns, which were these communities that formed right after slavery. Some of them, the families purchased the land, some of the land was given to them by the former plantation holders. That
Mm,
is something that I think is amazing, and just something that's just so American. It
it
talks so
is.
much about how we can together just turn something really brutal into something really beautiful and enduring. And I know Aunt Edna talked about the people of Freetown all the time, and she felt they were looking over her shoulder, they were watching her and guiding her,
I bet
and
they
she
were.
felt beholden to spread that story.
I wouldn't pretend that I could write that book. I would love to, but I do know someone that um, is very close to that subject matter. And
Mm, mm, mm.
offline, I'm going to pursue that
Okay,
and maybe recommend to you. But
okay.
I mean, like I said, you're so easy to talk to. I can't believe we're out of time, already. But before we go, is there any last um, inspiring message? Because you are so inspiring. Like I said, you have your own family and your work and your job. You've taken on the foundation and preserving the legacy of your Aunt Edna, along with your family, your entire family. And that's very honorable, and inspiring. But
Oh,
anything you
thank
want,
you.
yo, I mean it sincerely. So, is there anything that you would say to anybody if they're pursuing a career in writing or culinary or
Mhm, mhm.
families? Yeah.
I would say follow your heart.
Mm.
Follow your memories, your ancestors, those people that have gone before you have a lot to say. They have many lessons to pass on that are still valuable to all of us today. be proud of that. Um, the, I live by the Air Force
I
Base,
can hear
so I hear
that.
the fighter jets going over.
At
Yeah, they go
first,
over in threes.
I was like, at first I thought it was here because sometimes, living, like we live near the water and then
Ah,
from Manhattan
okay.
and a naval base is over there that sometimes,
Ah, right,
but then
right,
I
right.
recognize it from you.
Yeah, this is Buckley Space Force, I think. It's
Oh,
right behind the house. Yeah, I would say please do it. Do not be discouraged by age at all. You're just beginning. And Edna proved that to me, and all of her sisters and brothers continue to work and be just give of themselves, give to your community, and telling your story, your family's story, is a gift to the rest of us because those experiences we can benefit from and we can learn from,
that's good
and
advice.
they are precious, those memories, and of great value to
That is,
all of us.
of course, excellent, inspiring advice from you. I'm putting up your Instagram here so that people can follow you, and also put up your LinkedIn.
Okay,
So
great.
if you
Thank you.
want to be able to follow you that way. And oh, it's up on the top. I see. All right, so I'll put
Mhm.
both of them there, so we'll have that. But I do encourage people to go to the foundation and apply for the
Yes,
scholarship if you're a candidate, and look into the foundation if you
yes.
be a sponsor, corporate sponsor, or donate. So Nina, I can't thank you enough, and especially for being patient with some of the technology, issues up front.
Okay.
But you and your family are beautiful, and
Oh, thank you.
very, very appreciative. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Bye bye.
We'll be in touch. Bye bye.